They've already moved their homecoming game to make sure it's against Baylor. They might be the most talked about team in all of college football. But is the hype surrounding Neon Deion's Colorado Buffaloes real? We'll talk about it on Locked on Baylor.
You are Locked on Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello there. Welcome to another episode of Locked on Baylor, brought to you by Game Time and part of the Locked on Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. I'm your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and the Cam Show on Rogue Media Sports Network. Thank you so much for making it your first listen today and every day as we chug along into our Big 12 opponents season preview. We've done the one non-conference game in Utah. Now it's time for the first conference game, which will be up in Boulder, Colorado against the CU Buffs. So I've got Kevin Borba from Locked on Buffs coming on, joining the show and talking all about all that comes with this program, right? They've been in the news recently for off-the-field issues. Again, whether it's real or whether it's not, whether the hype behind this coach and these players and this program is real, and why they gave Baylor the bulletin board material for that game on September 21st. All that and more with my conversation with Kevin Borba of Locked on Buffs. The most intriguing new member of the Big 12, to say the least. The Colorado Buffaloes come back to the Big 12. What a homecoming. And Kevin Borba joins the show now. Kevin, thanks so much for coming on. It's been an interesting summer and really the last few days, last week or so, covering this Colorado Buffaloes team. Never a dull moment.
Never a dull moment. Next thing you know, I'm on a trip with my girlfriend in Atlanta, trying Ethiopian food for the first time.
Nice.
And then people keep tweeting at me and texting me this article, and they're like, "Hey, dude, what's going on?" I'm like, let me take a look-see.
Oh, man. So anyway, it's basically the overarching theme of this story is kind of the same as a lot of the other stories that have come out and tried to make reaches towards there's a culture problem at Colorado. Mm-hmm. And for college football historians, it feels like easy pickings because we've heard that before with Colorado. And it's just like, oh, here we go again. This is the pre-McCartney era all over again. So I don't know. Is this something that Colorado fans just see and are like, oh, here's another one? Or do any of these carry any kind of weight in terms of a chaotic culture within the walls there at Folsom Field?
Yeah, I think we have to look at it from two different perspectives. The earlier summer perspective, which feels like a year ago now, was the Athletic report that had interviews from players that were on the 1-11 Carl Durrell team that were kind of holdovers that stuck around for a little bit. And they shared their experience of what it was like to be a holdover from that previous regime. And Deion Sanders made it clear right away that, hey, I want as many new guys in here as possible. So does it shock me that they weren't like the most open to the guys that they were trying to replace? No, it doesn't. And I think we kind of see that around college football. Well, we don't see it, I think, is the difference, the biggest difference. When Deion Sanders took the job, there was a YouTube video of him saying, hey, I'm bringing my luggage and it's Louis. No coaches across the country ever have those conversations on YouTube. Like, we'll just call a spade a spade. Like when Dave Aranda took the job at Baylor, he wasn't publishing those conversations with, hey, we appreciate what you've done here in Waco, but I think it's best for you to leave. Like that just wasn't made public. So I think that part of the early part of the summer where people were upset about players sharing their experience, I think most of that was just people not ready to see the behind the scenes of college football. I think it was done differently. I'm not going to deny that it was done differently, but those conversations are had in many different ways across the country at every program. And so those parts, or that part of the summer, was interesting because I think a lot of people were upset to see that reality of college football. But what those players said, I don't think really touched on the culture. I just think it kind of touched on their situation, which is brutal, I know, but that's how it went down. Now, the recent one, which I think we alluded to a little bit at the beginning, this talks about sort of the report that came out over the weekend of Colorado having like a Grand Theft Auto sort of culture with guns, drugs, gambling debts of like $10,000. And it's like, okay, that's That's insane, right? Like, that's crazy. You don't ever want to hear that about your program. And so I reached out to people I know around the program that cover the program, and the way it was presented to me was not everything in that story aligned with much of anything they've heard. So I think whoever told the writer, gave the writer those quotes, because obviously it's anonymous, they felt very differently about what they experienced in Boulder. And I think that's kind of the weird part about this is, like, obviously someone had to have said that, but the amount of difference that I've heard is interesting. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. And I used the word intrigue to start it. It is more intrigue coming back to the Big 12. You know, they say Texas and OU leaves. Where's the interest in this conference? Bang, in comes Colorado back to the Big 12. And let me first ask this before getting into some about Deion Sanders. But going back to the Big 12 after, you know, a decade in the Pac-12, mixed bag there. Right. I felt like, you know, this program was rebuilding in what turned out to be a pretty good Pac-12 last year. Yeah. Does this feel like a good sweet spot for Colorado coming back to the Big 12? Like, let's just say the Pac-12 didn't fall apart. Would this be a good landing spot for them anyway?
Yeah, I think, well, if the Pac-12 stuck together, I think that was the best sort of landing spot. Okay. Just preferred. And I have a weird perspective on it. My first job out of college, Pac-12 Networks. I'm a Pac-12 alum, if you will. So I have a sweet spot for the Pac-12, maybe a little bias there. But no, I think had the Pac-12 done what they needed to do, there would have been no reason for anyone to leave, right? Because it would have meant that they had a TV deal, which offers security. It would have meant that they expanded, which means they replaced USC and UCLA. And it means they would have done or gone through the right motions to sort of keep themselves in a relevant sort of stance in college football. And they didn't do that. So Colorado being brave enough and bold enough to be the first program to bolt, I think was great. Because obviously you don't want to be left like Oregon State and Washington State. Like I'm not trying to take a you-know-what on those programs, but they were sort of left like, hey, what about us? And it's like, sorry, we don't have room for you guys right now. And so Colorado needed to make the move. I think fit-wise, it's a better fit. I won't lie to you. I think Colorado never really fit in the Pac-12 because you name a program for me, Oregon and Oregon State, rivals. Washington and Oregon, rivals. USC and UCLA, rivals. USC and Stanford, rivals. Whatever it is.
Arizona State.
Yeah, exactly. Like everyone had someone. And Colorado came in with Utah, who they were like, hey, it's the mountain schools. And everyone's like, okay, like we don't care.
With all that history. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, but they're in the mountain time zone. It's like, cool, I guess. Like Colorado never fit in. And
it's not very close, by the way.
Right.
Boulder to Salt Lake.
Yeah, no, it's not. Yeah. I think people just were like really honing in on that. Like it'd be like if Texas and like, I don't know, Houston were rivals. It's like Austin and Houston aren't the closest, but they are in the same state, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So it's one of those things. But Colorado just never had a fit there. They were kind of like that new kid that never found their click. And so the Big 12 offers them a chance to form new rivalries because obviously there's new programs, there's old programs that they have relationships with. And from a competitive standpoint, they could compete. They weren't competing in the Pac-12. We'll call a spade a spade. Like they were consistently like bottom of the barrel. They had like 1 or 2 good years in recent memory. And even then they weren't able to sustain that success. So the Big 12 offers a fresh new breath and a chance to fit in.
You know, I might just go to that game, Baylor at Colorado. And the way I'm going to do that, at least for the game tickets, has to be through Game Time, and a sponsor of Locked On Baylor and today's episode. They're the only place I go to buy tickets. And it's not just for games, it's for anything with a ticket, right? Theater, concerts, comedy shows, just about anything you could think of. Game Time has it. And the reason I go to Game Time rather than the other third-party sites is because I don't like the hassle. So I go to Game Time, I see the all-in prices, that the price that I'm going to pay is the one I'm actually seeing on the screen. I can see the view from my seats. Basic stuff, but other places don't do it. Game Time is the most customer-friendly one out there. Plus, they're the best for last-minute deals. You guys know me. I could flip-flop a little bit, and I'm like, should I go to this game? Should I not? Always go to the game. And Game Time is going to have the best deals for you, up to 60% off on the day of the game. And they've got the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time is going to credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONCollege, that's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. So now a step back into the Big 12 and what is a new and wild Big 12. Right. And obviously we know the coverage that Colorado got last year in Deion's first year. A lot of storylines, probably not the win-loss record that people were hoping for after selling out the spring game and all that. But this is also a program that is still building from a one-win season a few years ago. And that takes some time. So as you go into this first year in the Big 12, what are the expectations for Colorado fans?
Yeah, I think to talk about 2023 real quick, I think the expectations got a little bit out of hand. When I started to see graphics comparing them to the 2019 LSU team, I was like, oh, we've lost the plot. We have lost the plot entirely. Like, I think it was a good season. Like, you don't want to settle for mediocrity, but they were 1-11 in 2022. They were like, statistically, I believe one of the worst college football teams ever in 2022, if I'm not mistaken. So you come in, quadruple your win total, and I hate to be this guy, but one-score games can go either way, as we know. Colorado was on the wrong end of 4 of them. So 4 different bounces, like you don't waste timeouts against USC, you don't miss a kick against Arizona, you don't blow a 29-point lead against Stanford. That's 3 right there. They win 3 more games, and all of a sudden we're talking about a 7-5 team, right? Now, that's the biggest word in the dictionary is if, what if, right? And so coming into 2024, the expectations for Colorado has to sort of be, and I talked about this on my show yesterday, I think anything that's not a bowl game is a disappointment. I think they just improved this roster way too much. I think while the Big 12 is more competitive from top to bottom than the Pac-12 was, I don't think the Big 12 has as many juggernauts as the Pac-12 did last year. And so there are winnable games on the schedule. They should be in a bowl game. And I went on Locked on College Football, and I projected them going 7-5. So that's kind of like where I'm at. I think that's kind of a fair assessment. They improved in the trenches. You have one of the best quarterbacks in the country. You have one of the best college football players in the country in Travis Hunter. So it's like, if they don't make a bowl game, I think we're having very different discussions at the end of the year, because it's like, okay, what do we do now?
Yeah. And I will, for some good juju, Baylor, when they went 1-11, 2 years later, they won 11 games. So I'm just saying, I'm just saying, not trying to help any opponents, but I'm just saying. Now I have in the rundown here, are the Buffs worth the hype? And I put an asterisk next to hype because we kind of touched on it with that last one, but it's not the traditional hype. There's so much around off the football field, in a bad case this past week, but for a lot of the Flash and the Louie and Deion and the cowboy hat. And it was the most hype you've ever seen from a 4-8 team, but not necessarily going into this year, like, watch out for Colorado. They're going to be 10-2. So with that, you kind of just went over it there, but on an individual level, Travis Hunter is one of the best defensive players in all of college football. And Deion Sanders is definitely bringing in the headlines a lot for his play on the field. So riddle me this, Kevin.
Yeah.
Is Shedeur the real deal? Is he as good as everyone is saying?
I think he is. Like, I think you don't want to just base it off the box score. So let's just base it off what he was dealing with, right? I think me and you probably could have got a pressure on him last year. Like, that offensive line was as bad as it gets. And he still threw like 27 touchdowns, I think it is, to 3 picks. Like, he's safe with the ball. And when I tell people about how different this offense will be, like, I just want to give sort of this insight on what Shedeur was dealing with last year. So terrible offense line, we know that, right? Offensive coordinator change was weird. Like, it was a wacky thing because Sean Lewis went on to be a head coach and was like, at one point he was the front runner for the Michigan State job. Like, I'm old enough to remember that. He was like, week 2, Colorado's 2-0, and everyone's like, Sean Lewis, welcome to Michigan State. But Sean Lewis's offense was one that Shedeur, I don't think he's necessarily said he didn't like it, but he's kind of hinted at the fact it didn't play to his strengths. So the receivers were the ones choosing what they would do each play. Whereas now it is Shedeur's offense. Like, he is choosing what plays they're running off, obviously after it's called, but he's choosing what routes the receivers are running. It's all based off him. So it's an offense that he's more confident in. He has a better offensive line, and he still has a big arm and I think he has a very, you could totally slap me virtually if you want to. I think he has a RG3-esque deep ball. Like when he gets some air under that thing, I think it's a beautifully thrown ball. You could correct me if I'm wrong. I could be off here.
Okay, I haven't seen it enough, so we'll have to see. I don't
we'll
know.
Have to see it.
And by the end of September, I might virtual slap. We'll see.
You might virtual slap, and I respect it because it feels like a bold comparison. But I do think that he has the skill set, and now he has the talent and sort of schematics around him that will only help him explode more. Like I'm calling this a breakout year for Shedeur because it's like he was great last year, but I think we could see more from him.
Now, from one Sanders to another, what kind of coach is Deion? What is the Deion football philosophy?
Yeah, I think he's a CEO. Like I think people want to go after him for like, oh, he's not a coordinator. Like he doesn't know what he's doing. Like he coordinated his son's offense in high school, which I mean had to be worth something because it got him a college head coaching job, right? He is someone who, and I think if you just watch those well-off media videos, which are produced and published by his older son, he works with everyone. Like he offers insight that not many coaches in college football have. He's a Hall of Fame defensive back who, when he's working with the defensive backs, like who are you to be like, hey, I don't think you know what you're talking about, because he's obviously top 2 at worst of all time at defensive back. And then for a receiver, he played both ways kind of during his playing days, but he's the best defensive back of all time. So he can look at you and be like, hey, the way you're standing right now, I know exactly what you're doing. Or, hey, on that route, the way you did whatever this blah, 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 like I knew exactly what was coming. So I think he offers so much insight to his team that it's not really appreciated. Now, as a coach, my biggest bone to pick with him last year was his game management. I thought it was non-existent. I think it cost them multiple games. The USC game, for one, they wasted an early timeout in the second half, and they had a chance to, I think it was tie or win the game at the end of the game. I forgot what the final score was, but it was tie or win. They had a chance to drive down the field, and they not only ran out of time, but they were running the ball with no time and no timeouts, right? And then you look at the Oregon State game, it was right before the second half. They were pinned deep. Like it was like they were starting at their own 5. And rather than being like, hey, we're going to run this clock out, get to the second half down by a touchdown, they threw the ball twice or 3 times. I forgot the number, but they threw the ball incomplete, ended up punting. Oregon State drives down the field, scores a touchdown. Next thing you know, it's like a 28-point or 21-point swing. And so I think there's just some game management stuff that really needs to be honed in there, which is where I think my biggest bone to pick with him is.
And so then my next question coming out of that would be, how you just laid out your experience, but the Colorado fan experience, is it still the honeymoon phase for Deion, or is it something like you had said earlier, bowl game or bust? Hey, we got to start winning some games here.
Yeah, I think Colorado, there's 2 separate fan bases when it comes to Colorado. There's Colorado fans, right? And I think they're all in, and they should be, right? Like Deion Sanders has sort of reinvigorated a program that was irrelevant. Like in college football, you don't want to be bad, but it's worse to be bad and irrelevant. And that's what Colorado was. And so he's reinvigorated this program. He's boosted the local economy like millions of dollars. Like it's insane how much he's like helped out the economy. He's helped out the admissions process in a way where they're getting more diverse applicants, and it's given people hope. And I think you have to sort of take that into value. Like Colorado fans are hopeful now. Like Colorado fans, whether people like it or not, think they could contend for the Big 12. And I know it's not a traditional powerhouse in college football, but for any program to sort of have that belief, it's a great thing, right? But then there's also the outside of Colorado where it's people who are like, if Deion Sanders doesn't make a bowl game, he's on the hot seat, or if like he doesn't know what he's doing, so he's got to get out of there. And like I think people, you either love Colorado or you love to hate them. And so there's no in between. And I think we're learning that. And I do think that we really have to take this season with a grain of salt. Like, do we see improvement? If we do, great. If we don't, it's like, okay, Coach Prime, this portal thing where you're bringing in 50 dudes each offseason, let's mix it up. Let's hit the recruiting trail a bit. Let's get some continuity here. And so I think personally that Colorado fans have every right to be excited. Now, are they a little ambitious? Probably. But you find me a program across college football that doesn't think this is their year.
Yeah.
And then I'll be like, okay, well, like if you ask Baylor fans right now, like, hey, you think we're going to suck this year? You think all of them are going to be like, yeah, dude, we're the worst?
Like, maybe not all. Yeah.
Not all.
Maybe
like,
not
there's
all.
always those pessimistic ones.
Yeah.
But like, no program in college football
No,
is
right.
going to openly admit, be like, yeah, I think we're going to suck this year. So I think people just need to take a step back and sort of, you know how certain fan bases have like the goggles, like the Baylor goggles or the Colorado goggles?
Yeah.
Take off your goggles of like, other fan bases can't be excited, because I promise you every school across the country right now is like, you know what? We got that one transfer. The offensive line's back. We got that running back back. Like, everyone thinks they're going to be decent until they're not, right? So I think that's sort of my stance on it.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough, because there is optimism going into this 2024 season for all the things that you just mentioned. If we talked about during the show, you know, two arguably top 10 players in college football, depending on what position you're looking at, and being in a new conference and having that excitement. And it all starts, really. I mean, it starts with North Dakota State, which is no easy lid lifter for sure.
Trap game for the year is never great.
Yeah, that's not great. But first Big 12 game, September 21st, the Baylor Bears are in Boulder to take on Colorado. So tell me, from an emotional standpoint, with all the excitement going into this year and the new conference and the chance, you know, with a bunch of question marks in this conference too, to make a serious run at this thing, how important is that game in week 4?
That game is vital. You look at, like, this is how I'm viewing Colorado's season right now. Is right now, in my eyes, they're fighting for a bowl game. Like, that is goal number 1, get to 6 wins. So I personally think they have a very tough non-conference schedule. They open with North Dakota State, like you mentioned, which is like the Alabama of the FCS level. They win like a title every other year or every 2 years or whatever it is. And then they go to Nebraska, which is hostile environment and their biggest rival. And then you go to Fort Collins to play Colorado State the following week, who, should they beat Colorado State by 20? Probably. But did Colorado State take them to overtime last year and sort of have them on the ropes? They did. And so 3 games to start the year where it's like tough, rivalry game. And so you get to against Baylor. It's homecoming. You want to win homecoming, obviously. But you need to sort of get off on the right foot in the Big 12. And if you're looking at this season from my perspective, where it's like a bowl game is a good year, every win counts. And this is this isn't like to take a what on Baylor, but this is one of their more manageable games, I would say. Like, you look at their last 4 games of the season, they have Texas Tech on the road. They have Utah coming to Boulder. They're playing Kansas at Arrowhead. And then they close the year with Oklahoma State. Like, you could tell me they lose all 4 of those games, and I'd be like, yeah, I'm not shocked. So, like, you have to pick these weeks where it's like, that's winnable. Like, we have to capitalize. And this is like a capitalizable game in my eyes.
And to your point, it can be a real barometer in terms of, you know, if you lose to a Baylor team, which we expect to be different this year and could well be much different for the better, but that's a team that went 3-9 last year. So if you lose that, I mean, the outlook on the Big 12 changes a lot, I would think. And you mentioned, sorry, go ahead.
You'd agree with this, though. This year in the Big 12 specifically, like, it's a good barometer, yes, but you also can't hang your hat on it in a way that, like, the Big 12 last year, I think I saw a stat, it was like 48% of the games were decided by single digits last year. So it's like anyone could be anyone, right? And so you can't just be like, oh, we lost to Baylor, our season's screwed. It's like, you lost to Baylor, that's a tough loss. But if that's what deters you from reaching your goals, then you were never going to be a good team anyway.
And you weren't ready for it anyway.
Yeah, that's kind of like my stance on it.
And to go off that same point, I mean, early in October last year, it looks like Oklahoma State was out of it. And then they went on and go to the Big 12 championship. And you mentioned that game up in Boulder is homecoming. Yes. It wasn't originally homecoming.
It wasn't. They made a little switch there. If I'm Baylor, I'm salty about that. If I'm Baylor, I'm upset. Like, that's a little bit of like because we know we all went to high school, we all went to college where it's like homecoming. Okay, for my high school, we played this one school. They were like consistently the worst team in our league for everything. And we played them, right? And every year we win by 50. It's like, that's homecoming. Like, you don't schedule homecoming against Utah or whatever. I forgot who their initial one was, but it was an ambitious one.
I think it
will
was like
say.
Kansas State. Do you guys play Kansas State this year?
Yeah, we did. It was an ambitious homecoming to
Yeah, because
start.
that seemed like a little on the high end
Yeah,
versus
and so I was like, okay. And so when they switched it, I was like, good move on your part. For Baylor, that's bulletin board material. That's at the top of the list. They're like,
right?
hey, they said we're bad enough to be their homecoming game. No. Like that's how I would take it.
Because like if you just see it on the schedule when the schedule comes out, you probably don't think that much of it, right? You're just like, it's a little bit of bulletin board. But when it gets announced that it is switched to you, it's gotta be, right? Like from a fan standpoint. Yeah.
I get worked up over like the smallest things. So like when Colorado State, their head coach said the thing about Deion's sunglasses, I was like, oh, mistake. Like that was not what you need to do. And like Colorado turned it into like they had that whole slogan of like it's personal, and like Coach Prime turned it into, hey, he talked about he was raised right. So he brought his mom into the locker room and was like, he said that she didn't raise me right. Like they are fueled off that. So if Baylor, I would try my best to be like, hey, they did that for a reason, right? Like they think something about us.
Let's hope so. Last thing, we've kind of talked about the strengths, and obviously a lot of that does come from Shedeur and Travis Hunter. What are some of the big question marks for you on this team in terms of weaknesses? Where have you seen like, hey, this was a weakness last year, and I don't know that it's gotten better now?
Yeah, I look at the linebacker position. They moved one of their safeties down to linebacker. He's a lot bigger now. He's at like 215 pounds compared to like 187 or something, or 195, whatever. They moved him down. They added a couple in the portal. They added one in Nakai Hill-Green, who started his career at Michigan, was kind of a key player for Michigan, or was going to be, and then transferred to Charlotte, had 2 really good years there. But the rest of the group, I'm like, ugh, do we have enough depth there? Like, did they bring in enough there? And then I also look at the front seven in general. Can they stop the run? Because I think Colorado was one of the worst run defensive teams in college football last year. TCU tried to get cute and keep trying to test Travis Hunter in week 1. And like, had they ran the ball, they would have won that game by double digits.
Right. USC didn't try to be cute though.
Yeah. No.
They kind of stuck with it. Yeah.
Right. And like, you just have to like look at Colorado's last year. Is like when teams ran the ball and like chose, like Oregon ran all over Colorado, and there was nothing they could do about it. And so that's sort of my biggest concern for Colorado is like, can they stop the run, or at least moderately stop it or slow it down? Because the Big 12 has Taj Brooks, it has the UCF running back, it has Devin Neal, it has all of these guys.
Ollie
Utah
Gordon.
has a stable of Ollie Gordon. Thank you. So it's like, and Colorado plays like all of them. Like they play all of the best running backs. And so it's like, if you can't stop a run, it's going to be hard. And then the other question for me is the offensive line better? I think they are on paper. Like this group is way better. They come in more proven. They come in, I think, giving up like a combined, I think it was like 12 sacks last year. For reference, Shedeur Sanders was sacked 52 times last year. So if they could just be average, like I think that's great. Like if Shedeur Sanders is sacked 30 times, which is still a high number, but that's kind of around his average for his career, that's great, because that is 25 more plays. Like to conceptualize this, that is 25 more plays where Shedeur Sanders is not on his back. He's throwing to an open receiver. He's making plays with his legs. And so I think you give Shedeur Sanders an extra 25 plays last year. Do they win 4 more games? I don't know. You can make the argument, but those are my 2 biggest questions.
Man, that week 4 matchup could be a pass rusher's dream. I'm just saying it really could be up there, Boulder. Kevin, how can people find your work?
Yeah, you could find me over on Locked On Buffs. I'm covering Colorado, all the latest every single day. And then I'm over at Athlon Sports, where we are doing our best to report the truth. And we're going to see, based on some recent reports, what is true and what is not. We'll just put it that way. I talked about it earlier in the show. A little bit of a weird situation for me personally, but I'll just address it again because I feel like I'm bringing it up now. Sorry, Cam, to go on a tangent.
Go ahead, man.
Go ahead. Like the people I talked to did not emulate those same thoughts. Now, I don't know the writer personally, and I doubt anyone is willing to risk their career for a few clicks. So obviously someone had to have told him something, but you could follow me over on Twitter. I will keep you guys covered on everything Colorado, everything college football. If you like college football, there's a good chance I'm writing about your team. So come check me out. And I always tell people, if you're going to bash me, make sure it's not longer than 2 sentences, because I won't read it. I don't have the time for that.
That's a good point. That's a good
It's just
point.
too much work, you know?
It is. It really is. We're already doing enough. We're doing enough reading throughout the day.
Yeah.
Kevin, thanks so much for joining the show. Really appreciate it. We look forward to that game up at Folsom Field. I think I'm going to try and get there. I mean, everyone says how great it is in Boulder, so I'm sure we will have a contingent that's trying to get up there. But you can follow him at Locked On Buffs. And if you're coming in from Locked On Buffs, you can follow us at Locked On Baylor. Appreciate you guys who make it your first listen today and every day. Be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube, and you can find us wherever you get your podcast. Get involved down in the comments below what you think about Colorado, what you think about Baylor, what you think about that matchup this season. Get involved, and we will see you guys next time on your favorite show, which is, of course, Locked On Baylor.